3, 2, 1, and we're back. It is Sunday, December 13th. We have to, first of all, Julie, start on these Sunday shows by giving the, required by the federal government, they do require that we give them, it's from the Surgeon General,
yes,
after
absolutely.
all, a health warning
we
about.
have to comply.
That's right, about listening to the Sunday podcast.
Yes.
So go ahead.
You've been warned. This is not your regular podcast for
right.
those of you who listen to us during the week. And for those of you where this is your first podcast listening to us, well...
forgive us.
Yep, there you are. So buckle up. We never know where it's going to go. We've got lots of different things we've collected throughout the week. Some of them real estate related, many of them not. But stay with us and maybe you'll learn something new.
Right. So Sunday is our intentional opportunity to defrag from the previous week and to prepare for the week that we're obviously walking into. And, as I kind of stumbled over my thoughts there because I was thinking it's not just really a week that we're stumbling into, really. It's 2 weeks away from the new year, which is pretty extraordinary. And so, this is a time of year that can be a real blessing. It can also be a real curse. And it can be a blessing because you force yourself to be in appreciation mode. You have to be thinking in terms of thoughts that are going to make you feel, again, in gratitude. And then make it at the same time so you're optimistic about the future. But at the same time, if you're carrying a lot of sort of 2020 dread and sense of overwhelm into the new year, you're probably not going to have a very good holiday season, let alone launch to the new year. So it maybe is a good idea for you guys to have a defrag day yourself. That's what we call Sundays. And doing so, then it'll allow you to sort of give your opportunity to clear your own emotional decks. 2020 has been unprecedented. And, it's going to go down the history books of being the biggest sort of social, economic, health emergency experiment known to man. I'm sure it will. There'll never be another documented pandemic, economic, all the things that happened this year. They're going to be documented down to the, tiniest little detail. Things that have happened like this in history, going back to the sort of dawn of humanity. There's been obviously other pandemics and plagues and economic this and the other things, but nothing that's been this well documented. So from a historical perspective, you've just lived through something that's going to be looked back upon forever, really, studying how really wackadoodle people will act under when just a few conditions are present. And unfortunately, there's no reason to believe that those are all going to be behind us despite the vaccine.
You mean like the toilet paper crisis of 2020?
Exactly. Kind of there's going to be all kinds of little studies that are going to happen that will make their way into history books. Think of all the Netflix specials that are getting written right now.
Yeah, seriously.
It's crazy.
I know. And to your point, well documented. Between social media and just the different things that have been reported in pictures and stories, it should be pretty interesting to look back on. And I think it'll morph, too, how people think about it. Well, I think will change over time.
Well, absolutely. These things always do. Just if you think back in our own history in the past, how many decades we've been around? 5 decades? Mm-hmm. And all the big things that we've lived through, they do have a tendency to sort of change into other things. There'll be the experience of living through, say, for example, September 11th, and now how it's being remembered. And I have to say what kind of surprises me is that there's so many people, we run across them in our podcast, younger people, that maybe sort of have a distant memory of September 11th. Yeah. I don't want to talk about September 11th, but I'm just giving it as an example.
Sure.
And how just time has this tendency that, things go through phases. Like the first phase seems to be sort of like almost a brushing under the carpet. And then things over time, those experiences, historical things seem to come back as morph into some other different sets of thoughts. And you can look back upon wars that way. Like if you lived through World War II, if we were just Tim and Julie Harris living in Columbus, Ohio during World War II, and, we had friends and maybe I was, and maybe you were involved in the war effort, the whole thing, that experience is completely different than if, for example, you were studying World War II 50 years later.
Definitely.
You can't capture it in history books because history books are always going to be written by, people with a personal agenda of some variety. I'm not being political here. Right. And so it's kind of fascinating when you think about all those things that going forward, all of you guys are going to have these firsthand memories of what will be remembered as one of the most historical things to happen in the history of humanity thus far. There might be an alien visit that's on Slate. We're going to talk about that on the podcast today. Yes. But this is going to be one of those things that you will know. If you're in your 20s and don't remember September 11th, don't remember the Gulf War, don't remember, JFK being shot. That was before Julie and I's time. But if you don't remember all these things, you haven't really experienced them. Well, all of this you had. And I'll just bring it more relevant to our industry. How many people listening right now did not live through the real estate crash of 7, 8, 9?
I know. It's very interesting. And that there's so many different takes on that. When I have at least a few calls, usually this pops up on Premier Coaching of, we could lovingly call them grizzled veterans, right? Where they did live through that and it was very traumatic and they do remember it just kind of sneaking up on you in a way. And their question is always like, when's it going to happen again? When's it going to happen?
I know.
Should I be freaked out by this? And the ones that didn't, some of them are actually more freaked out of it because it's a kind of fear of the unknown because they don't have any precedent to compare it to. It's very interesting to see the different takes on what's going to happen next, especially as we live through also a historic housing boom, one of the bright parts of 2020. Nobody can argue with that. There's been so much, call it inflation or, whatever, but there's been a lot of wealth built up over this year. I think that's kind of a hidden story when we're all focused on everything else that happened.
Well, you guys can tell by what Julie just said, we're working on our predictions podcast for 2021, obviously. And actually, it's going to be 2021 probably for the next 5 years. And Julie mentioned the word inflation. And I was reading a CNBC article that was talking about housing values increasing in 2020, and they used the word inflation. They didn't say appreciation. Now, why is that important? Because I have never, not in one single housing article, ever seen anybody in the media, certainly on CNBC's level, which is mainstream, use the word inflation. Because inflation is a political word, really, at the end of the day. But for them to say that housing values inflated this year, that was a huge, significant turn on the road that you're going to see. And Julie and I have been talking about inflation for 2 years on this podcast, but really we started talking about it and warning all of you guys about it back when the Fed started pumping all this money into the economy because of the pandemic, Again, not being political, just telling you guys straight up that inflation is going to be a thing going forward. And inflation is the rising cost. Actually, you know what? Let's do our stories. So we did the story I just shared with you. This would be a good time. This one right here. This would be a good time to loop in an inflation story. But let me get to that. So inflation, long story short, is the rising cost of things. And it starts, generally speaking, and there's plenty of historical examples of inflation entering into an economy. And so, again, I don't want to get into the meat and potatoes of it, and we're certainly not economists. Not that you can trust economists, it would seem. But the reality of it is when you start seeing increased cost of housing and, cars and everything that you use, more expensive things, but they're voluntary things, right? You don't necessarily have to buy a house. But, of course, now you have rent inflation, things like that. So what happens is inflation will start out in the asset classes, and then it works itself into the non-asset classes, into the things that you have to consume. So nobody really pays any attention to inflation on assets because very few people really have any assets, right? I don't remember the statistics, but something like 90% of people don't even have $400 saved. So when assets, stocks and bonds and things like that go up in value, most people don't really care. And it's not much of a story because it doesn't affect a vast majority of people. But when they do care, and when inflation does become a noticeable problem, and when it becomes a political problem, again, we were barely paying attention. We were just little kids. But when Jimmy Carter was president, there's this guy named Paul Volcker that came in when Ronald Reagan was elected. And Paul Volcker was the Fed chair. And he basically said, this inflation has got to stop. And so what he did is he raised the snot out of interest rates. And that's when interest rates went to double digits. Now, why did he do that? Because he wanted to slow down essentially the money lending that was going on, because it was causing asset prices to increase, real estate in that particular example, and other things, and was causing problems in, basically it's trickling down to essentially consumables. And so there's the great fear of anybody who's paying attention to inflation is something called hyperinflation. And that's the whole wheelbarrow thing. You've seen maybe those pictures of in Germany where people were having, and supposedly it's happened in the United States too, where people are pushing wheelbarrows of cash to the grocery store just to buy a loaf of bread. And I think we've talked about this in the podcast before, and that actually did happen. Those pictures aren't fake. But that's hyperinflation. That's when your money has virtually no value. So one of the things that you look out for when you're a business owner or you're an investor or just a normal human being is you've got to start paying attention to where the inflation is starting to creep in into your life. Now, here's the thing that's fascinating, and this is the blessing that all of us have as far as just in the next short run, say 1 to 5 years. As inflation starts becoming a thing, and as your money starts losing its buying power, and as people then realize that their value of their dollar and what it can purchase is starting to decrease, they're going to start rushing to buy things that will at least hold the value of their money. Real estate, obviously, is the first go-to. And to CNBC's credit, they saw that the increase in cost of homes this year was largely that. It was inflation and these ridiculously low, wonderfully low interest rates. That trend is just getting started. So the housing boom was trying to come to an end at the end of last year into this year. It was starting to peter out in many markets, and you were talking about it on the podcast. You could see it in the numbers. You could see it just across the board. And then what happened is the pandemic hit, and then the Fed lowers rates to less than 3%. Now, people can say till the cows come home that the housing, essentially this boom 3.0 that we're experiencing now, that was a result of people, wanting to reevaluate where they live, and they're making all these decisions about lifestyle, and those things are all true. But really, what's triggering it is interest rates less than 3%. If you take interest rates away, these ridiculously low interest rates, you're definitely going to slow down the housing market. But the Fed has come out and said that there's pretty much no chance that the interest rates on mortgages are going to go up until 2023. And so, for the foreseeable future, if you want to know what it feels like to be in the right place at the right time, you're there, listeners, because you have real estate licenses. And that's going to cause the housing boom, and for a lot of other reasons that we're going to talk about in a future podcast, just to get to the point where it's almost unbelievable how much housing is going to increase in cost. Our advice to you, and just if you want to take something away from all this, is make sure you absolutely are ready for the market to go to the next level. Even if you're in a market where people are thinking it was going to take a break, it's not. Say all your local buyers have bought, their people are sort of, you're seeing essentially the generational shift has happened in maybe your semi-rural community, and you're thinking, well, the market's going to slow down. Well, enter California. Enter all these other states where people are leaving, and they're going to your rural and semi-rural communities, and they're buying up real estate, and they're driving up costs. You're going to see that happening across the country for all the reasons, again, we've been talking about in our podcast. So bottom line, even if you're selling in one of these, not self-proclaimed, but these states that people would mostly consider to be flyover states, like where Julie and I are from, you too are going to be experiencing a housing boom for at least the next 3 to 5 years. So, there it is. So along the lines of where inflation is rearing its ugly head because people are looking to invest in things that will be good stores of cash, I found this little article. Julie, you want to just give the high points?
Yes. Well, so the headline, go up, is how sports cards became a multi-million-dollar alternative investment. You heard it right, sports cards. So sports card collecting is having a moment since the 1970s. And sports cards, let's see, over 10 cards sold for $500,000 or more. We're talking about each. There were 2 basketball cards that sold for $1.8 million apiece. These are, just
I'm going to have you
cards.
So it said LeBron James rookie card, and now you've got to read
Giannis Antetokounmpo rookie card. Sorry, that can't be right.
Can't be right.
Somebody will know who that is.
Yep.
Giannis, at least I got right. Also saw a 2009 Mike Trout baseball card sell at auction for a record-breaking, this is one card, guys, $3.84 million.
So these are baseball cards, and I don't even know. I know who LeBron James is, but these other people, no idea.
At least they're easy to
that one's a basketball card. Okay, so is that the guy with the crazy name?
We only know that because we have a picture.
Yeah, I think crazy name guy is the basketball guy.
Yeah, I think
maybe not. Anyway, so these are just cards. These are the things.
Well, but it's not just that. I watch some of the auctions just for interest's sake. Of lots of
art auctions,
art auctions, manuscripts like old books and art, and even pens and all kinds of interesting things are definitely going for just crazy money.
So if you are out there, you're listening to this, and we can give you a lot of other examples of this. But again, you don't collect business baseball cards or whatnot. You don't really care. Well, the reason these are inflating in value is because people are looking for places to put their money, because evidently somebody with nearly $4 million not just wanted the card, but felt that that was a safer place to put their money versus, say, for example, the stock market or cash or real estate even. So it's kind of a fascinating thing. What you should all consider doing, which is actually, interestingly enough, against the normal advice that Julie and I give, is to absolutely buy real estate right now. I know you're buying it probably what will be seen maybe as a, or at least feels like a peak, but here's the continued advice for you. If you can lock in a long-term 30-year mortgage for 3% or less, and it's a house that is rentable now, and then, for example, if you buy something that's too expensive, that even with a low interest rate, you're not going to be able to make it make sense because, maybe it's a big house in a big area, property taxes, big payment, right? You're going to have to, really think it through. Mm-hmm. But you can purchase real estate right now across the country in some of these B and C markets, right? An A market would be, say, for example, even though these were A markets for a long time, they're not necessarily anymore. But Austin is an incredibly hot market. It's going to be for a long time to come. But like a former A market, which may have been parts of Manhattan, now they're still A markets, but obviously the days in the market there is extraordinary, and so you're not necessarily going to invest in there. So you maybe look into where Julie and I are looking, and the Carolinas, and frankly, a lot of cities in the South. Look to Charleston, South Carolina. Look to, some of these rural communities in North Carolina even. You can go and purchase properties there for $250,000, really $200,000 or less. And a lot of times with these ridiculously low interest rates, you could rent them easily and cover the payment, but most likely make cash flow right out of the gates.
Yeah, and ride the inflation wave up.
That's exactly right. So if you are right now in a house where your mortgage is not 30-year fixed for 3% or less, you need to consider doing the same thing. Lock in a long-term 30-year fixed rate mortgage. Do it now. And this is where it goes against Julie and I's normal advice. We normally suggest you try to have all your debt paid off by the time you're 50. But when interest rates are this low, it's actually kind of dumb to have your house in particular paid off. Because if you had the cash flow and the ability to pay your house off at this point, and I'm a hypocrite because Julie and I have many paid off properties. It's smarter to have that cash and put that cash to work because you'll actually make more money ultimately being able to borrow at these ridiculously low interest rates.
As long as you don't,
over leverage
yourself, right? You read others' minds. So, if you're thinking about doing this on a rental property, for example, imagine, even with that low payment, imagine if it was vacant for 3 months, would you be able to handle that? I think that's a good filter. And some of our coaching clients are refining into 15-year loans, which in some cases I've seen as low as 1.8%. So compare your payments and figure out what you want to do with that. Some of you, it's a good time for you to be moving. Others of you, it's just time to refi. So keep an eye on this. It's pretty exciting. Speaking of people moving across state, across countries, here's a fun article. Nearly 200-year-old Gothic mansion on the English Channel sells to a U.S. buyer. It's called Mamhead House in Devon. It came with a separate castle and 164 acres. And there's some beautiful pictures of this. But I also really like, just for inspiration's sake and seeing what's going on in the world, not just in your backyard, Mansion Global is an interesting website. Let's see. This estate is in a coastal county in southwest England. It's sold to a U.S. buyer. It's castle-like Georgian mansion, 164 acres, overlooks the English Channel and an estuary. Since 1833, it was built for a shipping magnate and local politician and his new bride. The sale comes amid a burst of housing activity in the UK's smaller cities, just like we were talking about in the US, and vacation home markets as the COVID-19 pandemic motivates individuals to seek larger, greener, and more remote properties.
So that right there is one of the things that you and I are going to be talking about when we do our predictions podcast.
Yes.
Because initially it was maybe people fleeing the pandemic fear of it, but now it's not that at all. Mm-mm. Now it's essentially people having different perspectives on how they want to live their lives.
Yes.
The pandemic gave everyone who maybe had it in a fleeting thought in the back of their mind, wouldn't it be nice to live in where Mamhead House in Devon, right?
Yeah.
Maybe that was a fleeting thought, but boom,
Sure.
The world says you don't have to come to work anymore. You can work remotely. And turns out that that's no longer a taboo. Turns out working in a location is no longer a requirement.
Imagine a Zoom room in a castle. That would be pretty awesome.
Yeah, but imagine the echoes. That'd be bad.
I know. Exactly.
But people would be like, BS, that is not just a Zoom screensaver. There's no way that you're living in a castle. Stop lying to me.
I know.
You're in some closet in your bedroom in Manhattan.
Exactly.
You're no way living in a castle.
It's pretty cool.
But those are the types of long-term shifts that change society, really.
Absolutely.
I'll tell you this article I didn't save for you, but this is an article I read on Bloomberg this morning. This is getting into the weeds. I have a feeling I'm about to only have about 1% of our podcast listeners listen to me, but still, it's worth knowing. So if you are living in, for example, where is this again? Devon, England, and you're living in your castle, and you're a U.S. resident, you're a U.S. citizen, rather, and you're living in Devon, you never are coming back to the United States, and you're not earning any of your money in the United States. Let's just say I don't even know what you're doing. You're selling fruit and vegetables in your
from your 164 acre
exactly
lot.
And maybe you're going fit and then you're selling said fruits and vegetables in the town, and or maybe let's say you're doing trading. Let's say you're a stockbroker or something like that, and you're earning all of your income out of that ridiculously gorgeous house. And you know what you will be doing if you live in this house, assuming that you don't have an army of helpers, you're going to be doing
gardening.
a lot of yard work. That's what you're going to be doing. That's going to be your full-time job.
Yep.
So your income that you earn above $80,000 in your new residence, which is located someplace else on planet Earth, anything above that is taxable as normal U.S. income. U.S. and there's a country in Africa are the only two countries in the world that have a resident tax. In other words, you live anywhere on planet Earth, and if you're a U.S. resident, you have to pay taxes as if you were living in, a state in the United States.
Even if you no longer own property in the U.S.
Right. Even if you have none of your income here.
Yeah.
You're not.
You just happen to be a U.S. citizen earning over $80,000 somewhere else.
Right. So this is the article I was reading in Bloomberg was talking about the fact that the pandemic is allowing people to now not just think about living in some rural community in the United States, whereas maybe before they lived in Atlanta and now they want to live up in the mountains in Tennessee or whatever. It's actually causing people to say, well, if I can live in Tennessee and work remotely, why don't I think about living in, pick your crazy place of the world that maybe it was a National Geographic story you read when you were 12 or something. Mm-hmm. And that's what's going to happen. And then now you're seeing, we talk about all the consequences,
Sure.
So you're going to see if, for example, if all of a sudden, and from the article I was reading on Bloomberg, it looks very likely to happen, that you're going to make it so that you can live anywhere on planet Earth as a U.S. and not have to give up your citizenship, which is unfortunately what a lot of these people end up having to do to escape from having to do all the filings. And many of them, it was only like, Julie, I didn't tell you this part, like many of the people that end up living in foreign countries and not having any real financial or any kind of tie to the United States, they don't even they don't even earn $80,000 over $80,000, so they're not even paying any taxes anyway.
Right.
But the problems that they have, and really the essence of the argument wasn't just because millionaires and billionaires are going to somehow try to escape taxes. It was because in your in France and England and all these countries, if you're a U.S. citizen, they won't allow you to set up banking relationships.
Oh,
right. So because of the way that the U.S. government works, you can't. So let's just say you marry somebody and they're, from, I'll just use France, and you move over to France and you're still a U.S. citizen, but you're married to a French national. You personally are essentially going to be living in the gray area because of the fact that you still have a U.S. passport.
That doesn't seem too cool, does it?
It's not fair.
So this is, you have to finish your thought. So this is up for discussion now.
Right.
They're considering taking that problem away.
They are.
And
which is going to open the floodgates for
Exactly.
more people.
Well, there's tons of stories like this. I only picked out my favorite.
Well, like, for example,
Yeah.
just to put the
Sure.
shoe on the other foot. So when we were in Miami recently, and everywhere you had people from different countries in Central America, right? And even beyond that, in South America, and someone from Brazil lives in Miami. And same scenario,
Yeah.
they don't have to pay any Brazilian
Right.
tax. So someone moving from Venezuela, the same thing. So in certain parts of the country, China, for example, how about this? A Chinese citizen who is absolutely still has their dark burgundy Chinese passport. Yep. They live anywhere in the United States. They do not have to pay taxes back to China if they live in the United States. Isn't that crazy?
It is crazy. Needs to be revamped.
Yeah.
Sounds
Well,
like.
so
And maybe the pandemic is driving some of that.
my goodness, not a fully matured thought here, but it's entirely possible because of the pandemic and some of the other things. You're going to start seeing migration from foreign nationals coming back to the United States again.
Yeah.
So it's amazing. Real estate is
all of things fueling the housing market. It's all good.
Yeah. So there's a great story about purchasing castles, if that's of interest to you. All right. So we're going to move on. By the way, again, for those of you who are just tuning in now, this is not our normal podcast. Our normal podcast is much more focused on coaching and training. This is in no particular
order either. Yeah. I kind of tried to mix up topics so we could switch around.
Well, let me give them. So just a little quick commercial here. If you guys have not yet downloaded your real estate treasure map, that is what the normal focus of the podcast is going to be for the rest of the year. The podcast is your fill-in-the-blank real estate business and life plan. If you've not yet downloaded your business plan, we are going to give it to you for free. Just text 2021 to 855-685-1045. Text 2021 to 855-685-1045. And one of the other things, Julie, I want to talk about on our future podcast about predictions. Obviously, predictions are going to be mostly centralized on, essentially economic things and opportunities for real estate agents. But we're also going to dig into where the big macro trends are going to be. Because there's some macro trends that are emerging. Again, I think they've been accelerated because of the pandemic. But I was reading about all these different, I showed you this article, right? These articles, these companies that are now developing virtual reality that is going to make it so that you're, in essence, going to have almost first-person experiences. And this is being developed initially for for business reasons. And so eXp Realty, for example, has Virbela, which is essentially what I'm describing. It's a virtual online campus. All the buildings are all online. You can go to accounting. You can go and literally go on a boat on this virtual lake and, all these things. But there's another technology company I came across that's incorporating these VR glasses that people wear. We may or may not be getting our 7-year-old an Oculus for Christmas.
We'll see how she does.
For the next 2 weeks.
Yeah, she said, I was turning the whole Santa thing on her today and said, you're going to get a lot of coal because she was goofing off. And you know what she said? She said, that's okay. Grandma and Grandpa will still send me presents. And I'm like, all righty then. We're going to have to escalate here. So,
Julie,
yes,
we just need to accept the fact that there's going to be an intelligence divide that happens where at some point we're just going to have to start paying her to be good.
Yeah.
Okay. So. Well, so I was thinking about where does this technology go? So if I'm sitting in, let's go back to my castle in Devon or whatever, and I'm required to be in these office meetings. You can throw me on a speakerphone or we can do a Zoom, and that's all great. It's worked out great as sort of a patchwork thing for 2020, but clearly the next move is going to be a complete virtual experience. And if you can have a virtual experience where you throw on some Oculus or whatever goggles and you're able to actually have a first-person experience that's almost indistinguishable. It's 99% of the same experience of being in the room. Now, like you, listeners, you're thinking to yourself, how is this possible? How is this even practical? Well, if you were to spend a little bit of time studying it, like I did with Julie, you would be shocked on how good some of this technology is becoming. Everything is accelerating as far as like the virtual experience, but also the technology that's going to be backing it. The software, in essence, is extraordinary. And introduce this thing we talked about a couple Sundays ago, which I'm really excited about it. And I think excited is an understatement because I really think that the Apple Glass technology that's going to come around, and this is just a rumor, you guys should Google this, but Google Apple Glass. These are glasses that are in essence the same overall experience as an Oculus VR situation, when you want it. So you're going to be wearing glasses that look like normal glasses that are indistinguishable from normal glasses. There's little cameras all around them, but you can barely see them, at least from the renders I found online. And you're going to be able to have not just like watching a movie while you're sitting on a boring plane flight or something, but you're going to be able to have interactive first-person experiences using your Google glasses. Imagine, like, for example, your best friend is right now walking to the top of the Eiffel Tower. And you can then put on your Apple Glass and you can essentially be hearing and feeling, obviously not the same, it's not first person, but it's close, exactly what they're seeing, exactly where they're putting their hands, the whole thing all the way up. Well, you can do that on video, but you're not doing it first person. You're not doing it it live. You're not doing it such in the way that it's a real natural sharing experience like you would if you did a video conference call, or if you did like when Julie and I were traveling. I'll tell you one of the things I was really surprised by is how many people don't talk on the phone. All they do is video calls.
Yeah.
Like everywhere, people were like, but they're still looking at their damn phone.
Yeah.
And so I thought to myself, studying this Apple Glass thing, I thought, well, that is something we won't probably be seeing in a year. Mm-hmm. In a year, here's what's really also funny. In a year, you're going to see people that don't have need prescription lenses. They're all going to be wearing Apple Glass, right?
And we're all going to be walking around looking like crazy people talking through our glasses.
Yeah, well, that's right.
Wondering what each other are looking at and seeing and hearing.
But
it's definitely an evolution.
When someone walks past you and they're talking to themselves because of the fact that they're talking on some earbud or something that's hidden away in their ear or just whatever, you don't even think twice of it.
No, we're getting used to all of these things.
Right.
And I think that's just the next iteration. It's going to be so much better. So that's pretty exciting.
But here's the reason it excites me. Mm-hmm. And if I'm drawing a full circle here, it's because that's going to put what you and I know is true back in the forefront, which is the ability to communicate one-on-one. And so you and I basically look at life and look at success in real estate in life, it predicated on your ability to have proactive conversations. Mm-hmm. And let's keep it practical for the sake of real estate. And as far as I know, you and I are the only ones that tell agents to learn how to proactively lead generate is the first thing that they should do when they're learning to be professionals, which no one else does. Everyone else wants you guys to learn to passively lead generate, mostly because they haven't been in the industry for long enough to know to tell you to do anything different. That's really the bottom line. It's cultural, but it's also their ignorance. They just don't know how to do it themselves, so they can't teach it.
And they haven't had the success of doing it themselves, so they don't really believe that it's possible. So why would they coach you to do that?
They've only come in the industry during this, the post-Zillow times where everyone's buying business, right? Mm-hmm. So they just don't have 25 years of experience, so they don't know. That's it. Fact. Move on. Okay, now, the reality of it is where there's a real divide in success right now is if I talk to any of you listeners and I ask what you do for lead generation and I listen to how frequently you put yourself in a position to have a real conversation with someone, and if I see essentially 90% of your supposed lead generation activities and just activities in general are behind a keyboard doing things digitally, I know that you're going to not have consistent success. You might have an occasional flame up, but for the most part, you're not running a real business. You're basically running a roulette wheel of luck, hoping that you land on red. In other words, you get a lead or something like that. So you don't have a real business. You have yet to develop the business maturity to move past some of your issues that you might have with regards to fear. Really, it's really the essence of it. But what you're going to see are the technology is, and this is again trying to make my point here. The technology is going to make real communication front and center again, whereas the current rendition of technology, texting, for example, sending emails, for example, doing videos, for example, that's not real communication. Mm-mm. It's
somewhere in between.
It's somewhere in between, but it's a half measure.
Yeah.
So if all of a sudden I'm looking at my gorgeous wife and I am wearing glasses because I do need a prescription, and as is she, but it's very possible, Julie, that you and I could be, in different places and we could be having this actual podcast staring at each other as we are right now, looking through our glasses. Mm-hmm. But the difference being it would be indistinguishable whether you were there or not there. Mm-hmm. That's where the technology is going.
It's going to be pretty interesting it can affect every aspect of your life, essentially, if you let it.
Now, think how many realtors aren't going to be prepared for that.
Oh, I know, because, if you're a textaholic, you can kind of hide behind that.
Right.
And you haven't had to bring your A game necessarily. I'm not saying that across the board, but that you have more opportunity to do things when you feel like it and to shoot a text off without anybody seeing you in person.
But it's not skills based.
It's not skills based, and
right.
I think that is going to shake up the industry.
And that's coming. Those things are supposedly, these Google Glass things were supposedly going to be announced 2020, but because they want to do it live, because they knew it's going to revolutionize everything, it's going to be the technological revolution that really is ripe for it. The industry's ready for it. Again, people walking around staring at their phones. Now in the future, everyone's going to be wearing these glasses, and then these glasses, in essence, are going to have all the functionality of your phone, but also going to have the communication abilities that are going to be, in essence, first person. And that's something that intellectually and conceptually, it's even hard for me to express it. So the best way to think of it is the way I described it. I'm wearing glasses. I'm looking at Julie. and she's the same back, and we're in the same room, but it's very possible that we could be having what feels to be the exact same experience, even though we might be in different parts of the house or the state or the world. That's phenomenal. And if you don't have the ability to communicate with your your prospective Brazilian buyer as they're wearing their Google glasses, looking at you, looking at them, or you're walking through a house and you look over your shoulder through your I said Google glasses. You look over your shoulder and your Apple glasses. So you're walking someone through a house, right? And when you look through your Apple glasses, and the person that you're walking through is walking right next to you, looking at you through the Apple glasses, and as you're walking, you're the one that's physically in the house, and you're pointing them to different things that they should be seeing. They're experiencing what you're experiencing firsthand. And I don't know I know for sure that the real estate industry is not ready for that because no one's talking about it. We're the only ones that are talking about it. But the reality of it is the reason I think people aren't talking about that is because they do not know how to have first-person conversations because they've never had to learn it. And those are going to be skills-based. Those are going to be the type. It's not just going to be a social conversation. I used an example of a buyer walking through a house. That is mostly social interaction. But if you're doing, for example, a listing presentation, you're trying to convince somebody why you're worth the commission that you're demanding in order for them to work with you, well, that's going to be a heightened experience that's going to be virtually the same as sitting across from him at the table. But those sellers, they don't want to sit across from you at the table. They want to go home and they want to put on their Apple glasses and they want to have a first-person interview with you as if you were sitting across the table. But if you don't know how to present, if you don't know how to answer, all the things that we teach you in our coaching program, you won't survive. That's just a reality. That's going to be a technological shift that I think is
going to be huge, especially. I don't think it's going to happen instantly because it's going to come down to ease of use and figuring it out and then widespread adoption of it, right? So that pretty much anybody you're talking to is going to have the ability to use the Apple Glass until that happens. And when it comes out, assuming that it's super rock star like you portray it to be, probably that's going to catch on pretty quickly. And I would imagine that in not too much time, it's almost like how our free listing package is. If you're the only one who didn't send it, you're kind of behind. Well, and if you sent something that's crappy, you also are behind. This is like the ultimate iteration of the presentation. You better have it together. You better be able to not say, oh, no, I don't present that way.
Well, think about it from this perspective also. Mm-hmm. So right now, you were giving me an example of in Austin where you have a fantastic coaching client. What's her name? Anna. You can use her last name. Maybe she'll get some referrals. Would she care?
No, it's my Anna and Kelly Harness contingency.
Okay.
They work at Moreland Real Estate. And my example was that they're getting lots and lots of calls from out of state.
You're still coaching Kelly Harness?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't realize that.
My
cool.
coaching clients stick around.
Yeah, wow, that's been years.
But I put those two together to help each other. Yeah.
But so, for example, in that market, you were giving me an example of the $20 million. They're like having these buyers that are popping super mostly out of California.
Yes.
They're looking for $20 million properties in Austin, which is that's the air is rare there.
Yes.
For that price range, right? And then
buy whatever you want, pretty much.
Right. But it was HP and all these other businesses, Tesla, and all these other businesses are moving to Texas. As soon as you start talking about taxes in California, people are going to start getting pissy with us. So we'll avoid that.
Right.
But the reality of it is that you are telling me that what they're experiencing in the upper end are the buyers do not want anything to do with anyone other than the listing agent.
Yeah, that's right. So part of this is symptomatic of low inventory. So it's not just Austin. This is a phenomenon that people are going direct to the listing agent because they figured.
Well, that's been going on for years.
Yeah, but even more so in a market like that.
Right.
And that because of that, there's not a particular loyalty to a buyer's agent. It's pretty much whoever's got the inventory is going to win, which is very congruent with what we're always coaching you guys to do. Be the listing agent and you're always going to win. But it is an interesting thing, and I think you're trying to relate this to the Google Glass.
But my point was exactly what you're saying. It's going to be harder for right now these buyers from say California. Are you the listing agent? Aren't you the listing agent? If you aren't a listing agent, goodbye. Yeah. So if you're having an interaction with someone and you're an early adopter for say Apple Glass, and you're having that same conversation, whereas that seller or that buyer would have had an easy time just hanging up on you before.
Yeah.
I don't mean that in like the rude sense, but just essentially acknowledging the fact that you're not what they want. They wanted the listing agent, but you can actually sell yourself through the Apple glasses. You're going to actually convert more business than the agent that doesn't know how to do it.
There's so many ways to do that. You can you can go and do your preview. They're not even around. They're somewhere else in the world. And you can walk through and differentiate yourself that you are that tuned in.
But you see how it's going back to sales skills?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
This is where agents are going to freak out and lose it because they have to adapt. Now, there are things about the pandemic and this whole, Zoom room phenomenon that I like, because I think that the pandemic has fast forwarded lots of agents who never knew how to do a video call have had to learn that. And I feel like that's almost a bridge to make them okay with something this radical.
Well, so here's the funny thing about that technology. Man, I didn't even have it as a story we were going to talk about.
Yeah.
But here's the funny thing.
Mm-hmm.
It's not radical. Everything that's happened prior, these half measures, the Zoom rooms and the virtual offices and the things, those were the radical things because those were full of compromises.
Yeah.
And I want, seriously, Julie, I want you to think about it. We're standing here looking at each other.
Sure.
From what I've read online, right? This Apple Glass technology is going to make it indistinguishable.
Yeah.
Because it's not only just your eyes, it's your ears too.
It's the full experience.
It's the full experience.
Yeah.
So if all of a sudden...
It's like the holodeck from Star Trek.
Exactly.
Not to totally nerd out, but some of our listeners might have some idea what that is.
Oh, they all do.
Yeah. Or even, it's kind of like a hologram that doesn't look like a hologram.
Right.
It's that much better.
Right. Well, it's not a hologram because my Apple glasses will have cameras here, and here. Mm-hmm. And they're going to be seeing you, and you're going to be seeing me. And what I'm going to be seeing is what my glasses, my cameras are. You get what I'm saying? So it's going to be projecting back. Yeah. So when you can think from a business perspective how that's going to really create a lot of opportunities. That excites me for those of you who actually are going to learn how to have sales skills. For those of you who've allowed yourself to become bridge trolls, where you basically, have just been hiding behind your computers. And now essentially the demands from consumers are going to be that they want to actually see who they're talking to. And if you don't know what to say, if you don't know how to say it, if you don't know how to present, that's called full circle, kids.
Yeah, well, there's a reason that one of the chapters in the Harris Rules book is to upgrade everything to look at what is the perception? If you want to come off as like an Anna Lee in Austin that deals with high-end clients, that can handle high-end clients, that can talk the talk, do you look like she looks? Do you speak like she speaks? Or are you kind of tap dancing a lot of the time and, kind of getting by without having to upgrade everything? And we talk about everything from, how you dress to how you speak, what your car looks like. This is going to fall into that category, I think. Because if you don't adopt this kind of thing, you're gonna be the weirdo.
But
you're not even gonna get the call in the first place.
But that's what's fascinating. So this level of almost one-on-one, firsthand interaction is going to cause a group of people to separate themselves from the herd because they're going to embrace it fast.
Yes.
Okay, they're going to start seeing it that what you just said makes sense. Whereas, Julie and I are hiring right now for our company, and one of the jobs that we're hiring for is a marketing manager, and it's a 6-figure job, and it's we're getting a lot of resumes, and after you submit your resume, if you want to apply for it, it's on Indeed.com, and so you then are required to do a video interview, and in other words, you have to go to this other app. It's called, I'll tell you what it's called. You guys can even use it.
They can use it for hiring.
I got to click on it here. It's called Spark Hire. So then you pop over to Spark Hire, and then there's a whole bunch of questions that we've got prepared. You've got 20 seconds to answer. Maybe it's only 15 seconds to answer each question on the Spark Hire interview. And I'm hiring people, and I'm obviously trying to judge them by what they actually can deliver to the company.
Doesn't it also give them some time to sort of pitch themselves?
No, the questions.
The questions have to do that?
The questions are basically like, give us an example of when you did a marketing thing and it didn't work, or what do you think the main function of it? They're interview type questions, right? And so they're sitting in front of their computer and they're answering, they're being asked these questions. They're giving a limited amount of time. They aren't told what the questions are ahead of time, just as if it were a real interview.
Okay, that's good stuff.
Because it is a real interview.
Yeah.
And so I'm getting these videos to watch all of them through. It takes like half hour, 45 minutes to watch all of them answering all the questions. But what is really shocking to me is how many of them are showing up to these video interviews that haven't looked like they've bathed in weeks.
That's shocking. I watched just a handful of those with you, and it's like, okay, so this is for a marketing job.
Yes, where you're supposed to market yourself.
Right. That would be, kind of like
paying over $100,000 a year.
Right.
Yeah.
Get out of your jammies, people.
Seriously, there was a dude in his jammies. I mean,
A dude in his jammies.
Well, look, they may not have been his jammies, but let me just put it
Okay.
this way: it was not age appropriate for
No.
a guy who was probably at least
Didn't
30.
look good for an interview.
No, and there's other people who had like underwear sitting on couches and stuff in the back there. It's like, what
My
the hell?
favorite one was the window air conditioner and the duct tape.
Yeah, right. Just sitting over her shoulder, there's a window air conditioner that was being held to a window with what looked like about 1,000 pounds of, duct tape. That's the background she chooses to have for an interview for a job paying over 6 figures. Now, it wasn't just, it was virtually all of these. And this is a sweet job. And it was virtually all of these. It was home based. And we're great people to work with. We'll give you all kinds of autonomy.
I understand home based, but there's home based like get the troll bridge dwellers.
Yes.
Okay? And then there's like home base have it together.
Well, then we stumbled across some people that applied for the job that had the skill set, actually took the time to make themselves look nicer, made sure that there was no dirty underwear in their background, and did the whole thing, and actually spent some time at it. And I just thought to myself, how insane is it that those other people didn't think that stuff mattered?
Yeah, well, so your overall point, though, is that
it wasn't an age thing either.
No.
There was plenty of older people that looked like bridge trolls. There were younger people that looked like bridge.
Absolutely.
Right.
It's not about that. But I think the point you're making here is, at least in these cases with these interviews that are on video, there were 2 or 3 that clearly stood out as having thought it through. They understood what they were applying for. They took some time to get it together. They worked on their presentation. They could put a sentence together. And it was so obvious versus everyone else. And I think that what you're talking about is
they didn't have a presentation because they weren't given the questions ahead of time. But they themselves were, polished.
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to say.
But again, not even polished in the sense that they've been practicing to be interviewed.
No.
But just they cleaned themselves up.
Like as a human,
they
polished.
thought about what will the experience be. And so my takeaway from that experience, and we're going through right now, and we're going to be doing a lot of hiring in the next 90 to 120 days for our company. But my takeaway from that was, how is it, again, where is this psychological disconnect, this cultural disconnect between how you look, how you present, why are you, Mr. Person who is applying for this job, not taking into consideration the things that are the base core root elements that everyone should be taking into consideration? What world do you live on that you think that that's how you should present yourself for an interview? And I think to myself, even if this person said the most brilliant stuff ever, if this is how they run their lives, and I'm literally looking right into essentially the environment in which they look, no way in hell I'm going to hire them.
No, it's basic stuff.
Yeah.
And, some of it is conscious and some of it is subconscious too. I always think when we have these discussions about this, I always think about like you hire a personal trainer and you're both consciously and subconsciously kind of summing them up. Like, do they look like they're in shape? Do they look like they've ever been trained? Or is this kind of like their side hustle? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It's kind of the same thing, only, on a business level.
No, so why are we telling you all this? Because we were trying to explain to you that to be successful in this industry right now, when essentially all ships are rising, just almost like there's a global tsunami and all ships are rising because there's, incredible opportunity. The way you differentiate yourself are these tiny little things that you should be doing anyway. Yes. This, and we talk about this in Harris Rules. Julie mentioned it, upgrading everything. Great time of year, not just to be reading Harris Rules, which is available everywhere, real bookstores and online. It's still cheapest on Amazon, by the way, I checked. We should read some of the Harris Rules reviews. Some of them are funny.
They're great.
Yeah, but we have over 400 5-star reviews. Get the book. It's available on Audible form as well. The guy that the publisher hired to read the book, oh my gosh, it's fantastic.
He's
Definitely
awesome.
get this book.
Yeah.
But if you're wanting to know, how do I differentiate myself in the marketplace? It's these tiny little things that our subconscious brains use to value or use to judge somebody else. If someone's a professional, especially with what we're hiring for now, and they themselves can't market themselves for the sake of getting the job in the first place, why would I ever expect anything fantastic out of them after I'm paying them?
And don't you think every homeowner seller in the world would have exactly the same thought process when interviewing a listing agent?
Right.
Whether that's over Google Glass or live, they're still going to have that same filter.
So if you're a brand new agent, or if you're somebody that wants to take your business to the next level, the very simplest of things you can do are what we've just been talking about that will give you an unfair advantage if your competitors are, for some reason, following the current zeitgeist of looking like a bridge troll. I mean, there's no other way to summarize it.
Exactly.
Right? Okay, so moving on, talking about...
Choose your story. There's
okay, let's do another real estate one, then we'll go back to some of these other
Right.
zany ones you found. I'm just wondering if people are
This one's
listening. Like
interesting.
people listening right now, we have thousands of listeners. I wonder if they're going like, "Oh my God, these people need more downtime."
Weirdos.
All right,
Yep.
this, yeah. Well, we are weirdos.
That's all right. We can admit
You
that.
can't be us and not be a weirdo.
No. So here in other housing, this is kind of a side thing that I'm following just for interest's sake.
Yeah.
This is a different website called priceypads.com that has lots of beautiful and interesting houses and pictures. 27,000 square foot Lake Tahoe mansion has a replica of the Titanic staircase. So that's different, right? It's been 7 years since it was since one of the most extravagant custom homes is sold. It's known as Tranquility. It was built in the year 2000 by Tommy Hilfiger, co-founder Joel Horowitz, on a substantial 210-acre estate. So the main staircase is modeled after the grand staircase from the Titanic. The architects were actually flown to Ireland to examine the Titanic's original blueprints and replicate specific details. So
The Titanic was built in Ireland. That's where,
Yes.
still to this day, the biggest ships are still built.
there's a cigar lounge modeled after New York's St. Regis Hotel, a 2-story library, indoor pool, elegant theater. It was listed for $100 million and eventually sold in 2013 for $48 million. I thought that was interesting too because we talk a lot about high-end.
Well, we have
and price
coaching clients.
price ranges,
But-
but look at the difference. Okay, so they wanted 100, they sold it for 48. How many agents would be like, "Oh God, I can't even present that"?
Julie,
offer."
look at these pictures.
It's incredible.
This is insane.
That's in Lake Tahoe.
Yeah, well, so Lake Tahoe, there's Lake Tahoe, California, and there's Lake Tahoe on the Nevada side, and where the market's taking off. And so I don't know if you know this. Do you have any personal clients in Reno, in that Lake
I
Tahoe
don't think
area?
so right now.
Well, I did. Matter of
But
fact,
I would assume it's the Nevada side that's.
the number one agent in Lake Tahoe was a coaching client. Do you know
I
that?
remember.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So, and we coached him. So anyway, I learned a lot about the market through him and a lot of Lake Tahoe. So Lake Tahoe itself, like you remember the original Godfather?
Yeah.
Okay, that was in Lake Tahoe.
Oh, that's
And
right.
yeah, and so that area of Lake Tahoe was actually a dead market for the longest time. It was too far away. All these
Yep.
other. So I think it was probably maybe around 2000. Well, it wasn't 13. It was after that. It was probably 2018, 2019. That area had then started taking off again. And guess who was being bought by? People leaving California.
Yeah.
Yeah,
makes sense.
that's a trend that's continuing to happen, and again, that's just making this real estate related and trying to stay out of the politics and whatnot.
Yeah.
And Julie and I are still scrolling, looking at these pictures. It's like we're such real estate junkies,
I know,
aren't
but
we?
I like it. Gives you ideas and helps you think big. Look at that indoor pool. That's amazing.
I was more looking at the wine collection.
This is good too.
Yeah,
Hopefully
that's
it's
good.
next. Well, maybe not too close to the indoor pool for your own for your own good.
But fantastic.
Yeah, just beautiful.
So, like, when you look at, for example, big trends that are happening, and you kind of like, if you take off the political filter and you look at them for what they are, there is going to be a continued increase in migration from high tax states, especially, to lower tax states. And it always starts with the highest end. Remember, you guys, we were talking about inflation before, and we were talking about how nobody really pays attention because it's just essentially only things that rich people deal with. Well, guess what? Now you're going to start seeing inflation creep into consumer items, which includes food, which includes, fuel, and then they're going to raise your property taxes, and then all your other da-da-da-da. So say someone, for example, in California earning $120,000 or $150,000 with a family of 4, they're then going to say, you know what? If I were to move out of California, I can save this. If I were to move just one state over to Nevada, this is what I can save. Or move over to Texas. And so these are the other types of trends from a real estate perspective that you should consider, because these types of trends, once they start, they don't stop. And now you have these huge employers that are leaving California. That's a trend that's been going on forever, moving to Texas. But now it's happening even more so with even bigger companies. Elon moving to Austin, for example, big surprise there. Yeah, it's huge, but now guess what? Did you guys know that the big, huge, kind of hideous Tesla truck that's going to be made in Texas near Houston, if I remember correctly? He's moving his battery factories there. Oh, okay, well, that's just one company. No, it's like 1,000, because think of all the businesses that are, were essentially situated around where Tesla was, just for the sake of serving Tesla. You can even start the most basic thing, the food trucks, right? But then you can expand from there. How many different, just every single impossible business that was, someone was entrepreneurial. They realized that Tesla's battery factory needed to have a special kind of coating made for their battery. I'm just making stuff up here, and I might as well open my facility near Tesla. Well, Tesla then moves to Texas. Guess what I'm doing? I'm moving to Texas too. And there goes more, essentially, obviously, the housing demand is going to go through the roof. And that's what we're seeing in these marketplaces.
Well, even here, Puerto Rico, there's so many people moving here. We have actually almost achieved zero inventory.
Yeah,
it's
where
crazy.
we are in Dorado.
Yeah.
I mean, there's supposedly 600 families that want to move to where Julie and I live in Dorado. And the houses are now doubling every year in value. Not all houses, but some of them are. And because there's obviously not enough inventory and there's not enough construction going on. The houses where we live, they're difficult to build because you have to build houses that are going to be storm-proof. And so you build these, the walls and the ceilings in these houses are made of 7-inch poured concrete. And you have to elevate the house. So like when you build a house where we live, I don't even know how much earth that they have to put underneath the house. Why? Because during Maria, there was flooding in the lowlands. So if you don't build your house up and if you don't build it you make it bomb-proof, basically, you can't even get permits to build a house. So a new construction home here, not even a huge one, is going to take 2 or 3 years, maybe 4 years from planning stages to completion. So that means there is not going to be a big building boom where we live. But in other parts of the country, there is going to be. So again, another mega trend.
Speaking of which, there's still interesting things happening.
Teeing you up.
Thank you. It was very good. Great stuff happening in California. And I put this in here as an example of thinking big, right? Mid-century modern spec house in Malibu to list for $115 million. That's a spec home.
But look at the title. Known as Case Study Number 2.
Yes.
That's the name of the house. The massive Southern California home features 133
foot by 33 foot infinity pool, which means it's going to be long and skinny. Infinity pool. And these pictures are really beautiful as well. Ultra-luxury mid-century modern spec house known as Case Study Number 2 in Scott Gillen's 24-acre 5-home development on the Malibu Bluffs coming onto the market this week for $115 million. It's a minimalist house that will be completed next year. Talking about, so for those of you who don't know, a spec home is something that a builder builds speculating that there will be a buyer for it. This is not built for someone. This is a builder saying, you know what, I'm going to build 5 homes up there, and I'm going to make them incredible, and they'll come. And there was one that just sold.
Where we are focusing just on today's show, not in general, but in today's show, on more expensive real estate. Why? Because that's where the market trends start. When you start seeing essentially migration trends, they always start at the high end and they work their way down. When you see a market heating up, it always starts at the high end and works its way down.
And don't you think it's interesting that there's so many people that are comfortable doing these types of things in that super high end? I think it's really interesting to watch.
Well, again, a lot of it has to do with people saying, well, where am I going to put my money?
Mm-hmm.
Right. But someone buying a $115 million house, that's a billionaire, a multi-billionaire.
I should hope so.
And this is house 5 or 6.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and they'll probably live in it for 15 minutes and then they'll go back to house 4 and 2. Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay, so here, are you up to your Santa story? I think we've read. This one's hilarious. This one's hilarious.
I got some Christmas stuff sprinkled in.
You know what? Let's do the Christmas one so we can round the bend so we can keep it festive. This story was really cool. This one's crazy. All right. So we like to shock you guys with stories that are irreverent. Well, I mean, on Sunday all the time.
We always
try
a little alien something here or there.
Yeah, we like the alien stories just because it makes people think we're nuts. And we love reading reviews, frankly, of our podcast after we've talked about aliens.
And it makes for interesting titles.
Because people it's like if people have only listened to one podcast, and Julie and I were talking about aliens mostly to entertain ourselves, and then you can tell they're not regular listeners, and they give us their review, and they go, how the hell is this couple so successful, and how are they so famous in real estate coaching? They're batshit crazy. I mean, some of the reviews I've read after we've done stories like this, actually,
we try to warn you.
They're my favorite reviews, though.
I know
the ones where they think we're nuts.
Well, so there may be aliens among us. Scientists are studying the Caribbean Reef octopus, which, incidentally, Tim, is like right off of our neighborhood coast here. But we probably wouldn't know it because they're so good at hiding. It's an absolute master of disguise, one of the most intelligent known invertebrates. Individuals of the species completely change their color from one moment to the next. And it's not just color. They also blend with their surroundings, but they can change the texture of their skin. So they can appear to have the same topography of like coral or what have you. Scientists are interested in them because I can't remember if it's I think it's chromosomes. Normal humans have 23.
Well, but
These things have 500.
What you just said was interesting, but not the real story, because people know that about octopuses. Everyone knows that they're super smart, and like maybe human level intelligence, if not more so.
Ramping
right?
up into that.
Oh, okay, sorry.
That's okay. But the scientists are interested because they have so much more DNA and so many more chromosomes
Than humans
do. Like, I think it's like we have 23 and they have over 500. And that allows them to do these types of things up, and they're so good at transforming that they can actually look like another animal.
So, like, you guys have heard of 23andMe, the thing that tracks your DNA, basically takes your DNA and tells you where your ancestral relatives are and your maybe some health stuff and whatnot. Well, if you were an octopus, it would be 500andMe.
Yeah, they're going to be pretty busy with that.
Right.
So they're studying them, and some people have speculated that maybe they have alien DNA because they're so unusual and so different in the animal world.
I put up your talking points. Did you already talk about all these?
Yeah.
You already talked about all these?
We covered most of that. So that's pretty interesting. There's lots of videos and things that you can watch about the Caribbean reef octopus. And Zoe's camp counselor has seen these before. And she's told me that when she sees them, she knows what she's looking for because she's a marine girl, right?
Yep.
But she's seen orange ones. And she's seen some that just look like the coral, and the only reason you'd know them is because you can see their eyeballs. Like, I probably wouldn't notice it, but she knows what she's looking at.
Yeah, and so so octopus's natural defense, if it thinks you're attacking it, is to throw some ink on you. Your natural defense, if you were to see one of those, is to leave in a flood of urine.
Yes, exactly.
Not
quite the same, but the same reaction.
You have the same reaction to the octopus. Okay, exactly. Because it says point number 5: Caribbean reef octopuses use their web-like arms, 7 rows of teeth, and suckers to catch prey.
Yes, I've been warned not to touch them, so kind of goes without saying.
I mean, seriously.
Now that we know they have 7 rows of teeth, I'm especially not touching them.
Are you really right? But are you really going to go up and pet that thing?
Probably
Zoe
not.
would.
Zoe would.
Yeah, definitely. That spikes
Max
on.
would. Max would want to play with it.
Or French bulldog. Yeah.
So
that's a fun story.
Unrelated to anything real estate, but I guess. Okay, so what
I think
else
you
do we have?
digress is what you meant to say. Yes.
All right.
We digress all the time on Sundays.
Do the leg story.
Leg story?
Go up, I think.
Is this about sex dolls again?
You wish. Let's
Do
see.
I? Well, that was weird.
40
Now, hold on. We have to talk about sex dolls since you just basically threw it back at me.
We are talking about the 40-foot leg lamp.
No, so it was a Sunday podcast.
Right,
it was
we should explain. Yeah.
Yes, Sunday podcast about it was back in April, and we were talking about all the businesses that are doing good from the pandemic. And I brought to the podcast a story I just read on Bloomberg News that essentially the sex doll industry from people being isolated was going through the roof. So I read this story, just like sort of I just shared it with all of you, and Julie just didn't even blink. So my desired reaction, which was to cause her to be exacerbated on the podcast, did not work.
I'm just too used to you. That's
right.
What it is.
You are. All right, so this is a good story.
So some of you, I'm bringing some Christmas stuff in here. If you haven't watched A Christmas Story, it is a hilarious, awesome movie. Okay, so part of it is the leg lamp, and there's a major award is what the leg lamp is in this Oklahoma. So let's see. A leg lamp, only it's 40 feet tall, very much like the one that became famous from the movie A Christmas Story, except this one's 40 feet tall. It's displayed as part of the annual Festival of Lights in Chickasha, Oklahoma, 40 miles southwest of Oklahoma City. The idea is the brainchild of a local economic council official trying to get people to come to Chickasha, Oklahoma.
Now that is a brilliant idea.
It is. It's hilarious.
Well, so it doesn't go into explain. So in the movie, basically, the dad is a salesperson.
You say they even have the box.
I know, it says fragile. Remember, he didn't know how to pronounce it because it was
Italian.
It's Italian, yeah. So he basically is a salesperson, and he wins some big sales award, which he doesn't know what it is. And so during the whole movie, there's this undercurrent, this subplot of him waiting for this box to arrive with his big present or his big gift
big award
that he was going to surprise all of his family with. So when this actually, now I'm thinking about it, he actually did know what it was. He just didn't tell his wife.
Yeah.
So this thing shows up in this big box. It says fragile on the outside, but because he knew it was some sort of fancy European something or another, he pronounced it fragile. He didn't, it was part of it was funny. So he opens this box and he pulls out this big, huge, horrendous leg lamp where the base of the lamp is a leg, and you guys could, again, watch the movie. It really is funny. And anyway, that was where this all came from.
So, yes, if you're anywhere near Oklahoma, it might be a nice little
Do you know that movie was made in the 80s, right? No, it was made in the 90s, wasn't it?
I think I would have to look that up, but it was about the 50s or so. Anybody that grew up in that era is a big fan of it. Speaking of Christmas things, NORAD's Santa Tracker has returned for its 65th year, and Zoe was immediately putting that app on her phone.
Yep.
So for those of you who have kiddos, you can install the Santa Tracker app by NORAD. Let's see, launched its website that let visitors track St. Nicholas around the world. For 65 years they've been doing this, so it's pretty exciting. And it has little snippets about what Santa's doing. He's repairing his sleigh.
Right,
over
but
here.
so that's what I didn't know. So I was watching this app, and Zoe said, Dad, Santa is in, where did she say, Minneapolis or Wisconsin or something? And I said, no, Zoe, Santa does not leave the North Pole until Christmas Eve when he's going to be delivering presents. And she goes, no, Dad. She calls me Dada. She goes, no, Dada. I've got the Santa Tracker right here. And Julie gives, she's using one of Julie's old iPhones. And then she shows literally that Santa's camped out in Wisconsin. And then you click on it and it says he's getting his sleigh fixed. And then she then shows me the other places he'd been. So evidently, did you see he was in China someplace?
Yeah, and India too.
And
I forget what he was doing there, but
it said he was like buying toys or something.
Oh yeah, I was like, how is he buying toys? And so she had an explanation for that. She's like, well, maybe he's buying the supplies he needs.
Yeah, so we ran with that.
So yeah. It's exhausting, man. Now, all of this, mind you, on one of I think that's like an iPhone 6 or something, that she found from one of our moving boxes here that had been dead for like a year.
And she brought it back to life?
She just, on her own, plugs it in, brings it back to life, guesses my passcode from my other phone, and has all these. The only thing she doesn't have is a SIM card, so she can FaceTime us. It was shocking. Like, remember when we were on a walk the first time she called us?
Yeah.
What is this? So be careful, guys. Be careful.
Little children are smarter than you think. But anyway, this NORAD Santa Tracker is a really hilarious thing.
It's pretty awesome.
Because I did screw around with it a little bit. I mean, let's look at some of these pictures just because it is funny. Holy crap. Is that really NORAD?
Yeah.
No, really is.
Seriously, it's done by what is it called?
Strategic Defense. I don't remember what it stands for.
Air Defense.
It's
North American Air
Hold
Defense.
on. This really is done by NORAD.
Yes.
Illuminated in the NORAD Santa Track Center and the Peterson Air Force Base in Colorado Springs, Colorado. Okay, now I have a problem with it. These guys need to be watching,
Santa's
missiles.
Real.
Okay.
So,
I'm not saying Santa's not real. What I'm suggesting is that maybe it's a good idea that these festive NORAD people maybe stay focused on their primary job. Because, all right. Oh my gosh, this is hilarious. All right, so this is called the NORAD Track Santa Operations Center Playbook.
This is a real thing. Next to a real headset. Yes, a sample conversation, key messages and discussion starters.
Common questions and answers. 2019 program contributors. Country tracking sheet. Germs tracking. Games tracking. Oh, it's blurry. Yeah, and so the optics for the app are actually really awesome too. Because it looks like basically they're tracking, which, you know what, now that I'm looking more at this, they actually might be. Looks like they're tracking him from a satellite.
Yeah.
Okay. That is amazing. Can you imagine having that as a little kid?
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I'd like to have that job, managing NORAD Santa Tracker.
So the question is how long can we keep Zoe?
I know. Okay, so there's one little, I'm not going to read all 14 facts from that, but since it is that time of year, and many of you, like us, are Charlie Brown Christmas fans. Some little known facts, and I wanted to make sure I got this right. Let's go down to the facts here. Let's see.
They're all, which one are you looking for?
Okay, so they had a hard time animating it, but here's an example of too soon to tell.
Okay.
So Charlie Brown Christmas almost got scrapped by Coke. They were one of the investors. Let's see. The agency behind Coke paid him a visit midway through production. Without hearing the music or even seeing the animation, the ad man thought it looked disastrous and cautioned that if he shared his thoughts with Coca-Cola, they'd pull the plug. But he didn't. He kept his opinion to himself. Even CBS, the TV channel, hated Charlie Brown Christmas. They were toiling about the special for 6 months. They screened it for CBS executives just 3 weeks before it was set. The mood in the room was less than enthusiastic. The network found it slow and lacking in energy. Talking about not being interested in any more specials. To add insult, somebody even misspelled Schultz's last name. But point number 11 is the facts. Again, evidence of saying it's too soon to tell. Half of the country watched A Charlie Brown Christmas. Viewers weren't nearly as cynical about Charlie Brown's holiday woes as his corporate benefactors. Preempting a 7:30 Eastern episode of The Munsters. Remember The Munsters?
No.
I do. My brother liked to watch it. Okay, Charlie Brown Christmas pulled a 50 share, which means half of all households with a television turned on were watching it. That amounted to roughly 15 million people behind only the show Bonanza.
Well, stop there for a second.
Yeah.
So this was in 1950 what?
When was
Whatever
the first?
it was.
65,
65, but I want you to think about that. Half of all so there are 15 million TVs in the United States. Mm-hmm. Okay, so, and that was
well,
only...
that's half. So
right, but listen,
million.
so there are 30 million, right?
Yep.
But right now there's over 350 million people in the United States. How many of those people do not have a screen? All of them have a screen. A phone. I mean, some of them obviously don't. But just to think that in 65, there were only 30 million people that had TV.
Yeah.
And now there's over 300 million people.
And I guarantee you all of those people only had one TV back then.
Isn't that amazing to think
but
about?
also interesting that aluminum Christmas trees were marketed in 1958.
Well, read the title. Charlie Brown Christmas killed aluminum tree sales.
Yes, so they had very strong sales by eliminating pesky needles and tree sap, but the annual airings of A Charlie Brown Christmas swayed public thinking. In the special, Charlie Brown refuses to get a fake tree. Viewers began to do the same, and the product was virtually phased out by 1969. The leftovers are now collector's items.
So you know what this tells me?
Unintended consequences.
Is big fake tree corporations tried to kill Charlie. They're
Exactly.
manipulating. That's how modern conspiracy people.
So it's just interesting.
Yeah.
There's more you guys can read if you want to. But
What? In 2015, the voice of Charlie Brown was arrested. Peter Robbins continued voicing Charlie Brown until he turned 13 years old, at which point puberty prohibited from continuing. In November 2015, the 59-year-old Robbins pleaded guilty for making criminal threats against a mobile home park manager and sheriff. According to CBS News, the troubled former actor claimed schizophrenia and bipolar disorder led him to make the threats. He was sentenced for 4 years, 8 months in prison. I mean, maybe I shouldn't have read that point. That's kind of depressing.
Yeah.
Poor guy.
Well, anyway, the point is that what the Charlie Brown Christmas has turned into is not how it started. So I thought that was a very interesting case.
Well, it is fantastic.
It is. Now we want to round out the show
with something that's a bit of a miracle, I have to say.
This is amazing.
Julie and I Julie, and no one listening to us will be surprised by this, who is, she's queen nerd here.
Nerd ball.
Yes, she is. But she's the one that told me about this. And if you guys don't know about what's happening right now, this is extraordinary. And this is where we should lead today's show.
Yes.
But before we get to the final point,
if
you've not downloaded your 2021 business plan yet, please just go ahead and text 2021 to 855-685-1045, 855-685-1045. Go ahead and do that now. Text 2021 to 855-685-1045. By the way, Julie, one of the comments was that people were asking why we don't have more commercials on our podcast.
Oh, yes.
And I'll tell you why, because I hate listening to them and I'd even hate saying them more. So I don't want to talk about Helix Sleep and Blue Chew.
There's tons of them we could do, but
yeah, well, we could, and we might be tempted to, but for now, we're just going to keep it to commercials for our products.
Yes,
I think that's the best way to do it. So just text 2021 to 855-685-1045, and if you don't, then the next thing we're going to start doing is commercials for things that have absolutely nothing to do with anything. But
just for fun.
Just for fun.
Entertain ourselves.
Exactly. All right, so here it is. I'll read the title and Jules can get into the details. Mm-hmm. Rare Christmas star will appear in the sky for first time in 800 years. So since before the United States was actually the United States. 800 years ago. A rare conjunction of Jupiter and Saturn will make them look like a single point of light in the sky on December 21st that hasn't been seen since the Middle Ages.
And you actually noticed this. We were driving
Mom and
home,
I did.
Yes, from taking Zoe out to a beach restaurant.
Yeah.
We were on the way home, and you guys both noticed, because you can already see them starting to get close to each other, and they're super bright.
My mom lives with us, in case listeners don't know what I'm talking about.
So this is Jupiter and Saturn. Jupiter is the brighter one. Let's see. So 4 days before Christmas, the sky will offer a sight that hasn't been seen since the Middle Ages and may have inspired one of the Bible's most famous stories. The two largest planets in the solar system, Jupiter and Saturn, will be so close to one another in the sky on December 21st that they will appear to be fused together in a single point of light. The last time this is believed to have been witnessed was in the year 1226, according to Michael Shanahan, the director of Liberty Science Center and Planetarium in New Jersey. The interesting thing about these long cycles in astronomy is that they come back at a very different epochs of human history. Shanahan told to Today. The event happened in the Middle Ages in 1226, occurred before dawn, so there was about an hour and a half before the sun rose, and you could see it. The last time astronomers believe was possibly visible since then was in 1623, but it occurred right at sunset, and there's no record of anybody actually noticing it. There's also been speculation that the conjunction of the planets formed the Christmas star, or the Star of Bethlehem, that the three wise men in the Nativity story in the Bible were thought to have seen, that inspired them ultimately to travel to Bethlehem for the birth of Jesus. So this is pretty
keep reading.
Interesting. And people also have had some thoughts about 2020, that this is an inspiration to end the year. One possibility is that these two planets did join together in 7 BC. This is the best part, I think. About a year before the earliest possible time of the birth of Jesus, so that it could have been a conjunction of the two planets. If the wise men were, as we think, in fact, astrologers, that could have been the thing they saw in 7 BC and said, oh, there's a big event happening. Let's go to Bethlehem and check it out. Alignments between Jupiter and Saturn occur about every 20 years, but normally they're no closer than the width of 2 full moons. On December 21st, they will appear, emphasis on appear, as the planets are still millions of miles away from each other, just 1/10 of a degree apart, which is about the thickness of a dime held at arm's length, according to NASA. The two planets will appear close in the sky for the whole month, as you and I have already observed, which people can see by looking southwest just after sunset, NASA astronomer said in his email. For people to see it in a few times during this period, it's a great chance to see the motions of the planets. You can imagine Jupiter and Saturn as runners on a track. Jupiter's moving faster, and looking from one night to the next, people will be able to see Jupiter approaching and then passing Saturn in their paths around the sun. He had some tips for the best way to view on the December 21st, which is the winter solstice, meaning it's the shortest day of the year in terms of sunlight in the northern hemisphere. Make sure you have a view to the southwest, unobstructed by trees or buildings, for a little over an hour after sunset. Viewers will also have to hope for clear weather on that night if you don't want to miss it, as Jupiter and Saturn will not appear this close into the sky until 2080. So get out there and see it, guys. This is all according to NASA. And as we said, you can already see this. It's very clear. As long as you're looking southwest right after the sun sets,
yep.
you should not have trouble seeing it unless it's cloudy.
Well, or at least you live in a city where there's too much light pollution and you're not going to be able to see the stars.
Go on a drive. I think it's worth, and I think it's especially special being that it's the winter solstice. It's near Christmas. It's the 21st. So, yeah.
It is kind of, you were saying this, it is kind of an interesting way to end 2020, right?
Yeah.
Having something that hasn't happened really for 800 years. That is kind of an amazing thing. This has been a really amazing year.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And I really am incredibly excited and optimistic about certainly the next 3 years, but certainly the next 5 years from the perspective of all of our podcast listeners. So listen, guys, it is our pleasure and our honor to certainly have all of you be podcast fans. And coaching clients, it's our honor to be your real estate coaches. We really, truly appreciate that and take it. I think all of you guys, I don't have to sell this to you. You already know. We take it incredibly seriously. We're always looking to improve what we're offering. I mean, I already told you we're hiring a bunch of new people. We're hiring people to help every aspect of your real estate business and personal life. Julie and I are always thinking about all of you guys. What can we do to make your lives better? Because we realize that our highest and truest purpose on this planet is to be of service to other people. Notice I said this planet, yes. Sort of insinuating that who knows, right?
Who knows, right?
Right. I mean, if Elon Musk has his way, we might all be living on Mars.
It's too soon to tell.
It is, absolutely. After 2020, you can't write anything off.
No, absolutely not. Somebody said, just wait until 2020 turns 21 and is able to drink. Then we're really in for it, right? Hopefully not.
That's
just
awesome.
joking.
That's actually awesome.
I think there's going to be a lot of 2020 humor that comes to light as we round out the year.
Oh, you know what? One thing we didn't talk about, which we actually, this is really a great way to end it. This one right here.
I know what you're going to.
Yeah, this one right here. So, again, we won't be political no matter how many of you guys try to pull us into politics. We will never do it. Julie and I are Republic rats. We're both.
Yeah,
and that's all
good news.
And so here's how we're going to end all of this. Coronavirus live updates. Vaccine doses are shipping to all 50 states with delivery expected Monday. So, look, politics aside, the government did say we'd have a vaccine by the end of the year, something that's really never been done. There's never been a vaccine. Hey, guys, is there a vaccine for the common cold? No, there is not. So there's never been a vaccine that's actually been created this fast. And this is extraordinary. Again, this goes, so just going around the bend here. Now that there's been a vaccine that's been essentially produced in a record amount of time, don't you think the expectations going forward for other things with regards to cures is going to completely change? And why did this vaccine get created so fast? It got created so fast because all efforts were pointed towards creating this vaccine. Bureaucracy was set aside. Regulation was, basically made lighter. People and businesses, government and businesses partnered to create a vaccine.
It's the definition of focus. Follow one course until successful.
Right.
They did.
Right. And this is, in essence, the miracle of 2020.
I agree.
And you and I talked about that since the damn thing, we call it the a-hole virus, hit in, February, that if this happened, that nothing really was going to come back to feeling normal in any real meaningful ways until there was a vaccine. And if you guys were, and many of you were, tens of thousands of you do, we were saying, how is it that anything will actually really, truly recover until the vaccine's in our rear view? And, Julie and I just got back from Miami, and let me tell you, we've been traveling all of our adult lives and traveling during the era of COVID, even to a really festive, really, gratuitous area like Miami, not the same. We were driving around with friends there, and they were taking us to different hot spots, where there's usually so many people on the streets, not for any particular, just because it's Wednesday, right? That they said because of COVID, the tourists aren't coming anymore. And we could drive wherever we wanted to go, walk wherever we wanted to go. And so and when Julie and I were walking around, it was in this area where we were staying, there's probably every fourth or fifth business was out of business. Yeah. That, the hotels
were. A lot of vacancy.
So when all of that is in the rear view, when people start returning and feeling free again, we were expecting, and we are now definitely seeing proof that where our theory was correct. You're going to not just see a little bit of a rebound in the economy. You're going to see an absolute resurgence because people are going to want to celebrate life. Mm-hmm. Like if you're asking why people are buying their houses, and you're and I'm a car nerd, and you're seeing car values go through the roof as well, it's because people are buying things because you only live once and you're dead a real long time. Now, are they verbalizing it like that? No, they're not. But it is a natural, when you're essentially being told to, live in your house, don't leave, travel restrictions. Here in Puerto Rico, there's curfews and there's all these, I got, shouted out by a mask hole yesterday just because I wasn't wearing my mask correctly. I get all of it. But when all of that is in our rear view, when people now are starting to feel free again, when they're going to celebrate life, and I mean that in the literal sense like never before. So, Jules, do you want to read the article?
Yes. All right. So this is the vaccine article. The U.S. government, with support of FedEx and UPS, has begun the enormous logistical undertaking of delivering millions of vaccine doses across the country. Trucks containing the first packages of the vaccine are leaving Pfizer's facility in Michigan today, with delivery expected on Monday to sites across all 50 states. The Centers of Disease Control and Prevention has said that the shots should go to frontline healthcare workers and residents at long-term care facilities first, where the virus has had a devastating toll. It's a race against time to ramp up the vaccine program into mass inoculation as thousands of people die every day of COVID-19. We know the rest of the story.
Well, so you get the rest of it. So basically, moral of the story, and then they just go into statistics, is the vaccine is here, and it's going to be given to frontline workers first, and then it's going to be given to people. Did I tell you this?
Nursing homes next. But
it's people over 70. So the people that are most vulnerable are going to get it next.
Well, that's smart. That's
totally
the way to do top down.
Exactly.
Sure.
Also what I was fascinated when I was reading these articles about the vaccine is that there's 5 different variations of something like that. And then like 2 or 3 of the countries are from Europe that have the, but the ones that are U.S. based are the ones that are essentially, ones that are shipping now. And it is interesting how where the shipments are going and who they're going to be going to first, how that was trying to become politicized.
I was going to say that.
And it was ridiculous. I mean, it doesn't make any sense. Obviously, you want to take care of your most vulnerable first, and that's what the government ended up doing. Say first frontline workers and elderly people, because like I was explaining to my mom, and she's 81 this year, that even if she got COVID, I forget what the statistic was, and she's very healthy, but the probability of her actually developing any sort of real nasty problem from it was like, was it 1 in 100,000 or something?
It's still, you don't want to get it, but it's still pretty low. I think it's more, when you're in a facility and there's a whole bunch of people that have it, you're in more trouble.
Yep.
But I mean, it's of course going to get politicized, but it is what it is. And if any of you guys listening are going to be either, I know that we have some frontline workers. There's a lot of people in hospital industries and nursing. Remember to follow the protocol, of course, because it's a 2-dose thing. You get the first dose, and then I think it's like 2 weeks or something. You have to get the second dose to make it work.
Yeah.
I think both of the ones coming out are like that. So just pay attention to what's going on. We are being tracked, of course, so because we came into Puerto Rico, and they're very good at keeping track of you, so make sure that you do what you're supposed to do.
Yeah, so moral of the story here, guys, is 2021 is going to be a fantastic year. Every time Julie and I think we're done writing our predictions podcast, more great things come out. It just, guys, look, you're in the right place at the right time. Use the next 2 weeks rolling into 2021 as your opportunity to hit the hard reset on yourself emotionally, physically, mentally. Look, you're going to have so much opportunity on so many different fronts. Julie and I are going to stay on the front lines. We're your frontline worker to make sure that you guys are seizing every opportunity that's presented to you. Number one job is definitely getting your business plan done. So this obviously is our Sunday podcast where we sort of just talk about the things that are interesting to us. That's what we do. This is what we'd be talking about anyway if you guys weren't listening in. And so we're going to be getting back to normally scheduled programming starting tomorrow with the continuation of helping all of you complete your real estate treasure map, which is your fill-in-the-blank business and life plan, which you will need. So go ahead and text 2021 to 855-685-1045. Text 2021 to 855-685-1045. In the meantime, you guys have a fantastic day. And again, please do your homework from today's show is very simple. Please share this podcast with as many different people as you can. And I'll give you a specific number just to make this reasonable. Look, you can just post it on Facebook. It doesn't really matter. But share it with 5 people. Can you do that for us? That would be a wonderful thing for you to do. You've listened to us now for 90 minutes. Many of you guys listen to us every single day. We have podcast listeners now in 57 different countries we'd have to look on a map to know where they are, Yep. And look, it's obviously making an impact on the world. Help us do what we are obviously and evidently designed to do, which is be of service to all of you guys, just like you are for your own customers. And the way for you to do that is to simply share this podcast with at least 5 people. Please do that. I'd really sincerely appreciate it. So would Julie, and so would those 5 people.
Absolutely.
All right. You guys have a fantastic day. We'll talk to you on the show tomorrow.
This podcast is a part of the C-Suite Radio Network. For more top business podcasts, visit c-suiteradio.com.